The room was quieter than usual when Joe Rogan leaned toward the mic. Not tense in a chaotic way, not loud, just heavy. The kind of heavy that settles in when the world shifts in real time and everyone watching knows it. The US and Israel had just carried out coordinated strikes on Iranian targets, military infrastructure, strategic facilities, command centers, and the footage was already circulating across every platform imaginable. Explosions over Tehran, missile defense systems lighting up the night sky over Israel, statements from Washington, statements from Jerusalem, statements from Tehran. And the question hanging over everything wasn't what just happened, it was what happens next. Rogan didn't start with outrage. He didn't start with celebration. He didn't start with condemnation. He started with a pause. Okay, he said slowly. Now we find out what this really is. That line caught people off guard. Because most coverage had focused on what already occurred, the strikes themselves, the damage assessments, the official statements framing the action as defensive, necessary, strategic. Rogan wasn't interested in replaying press releases. He wanted to map the future. And that's when the breakdown began. He laid out the first possibility, limited escalation. If this was meant to be a surgical message, he said, then the goal is deterrence. Hit hard, hit fast, make the cost of retaliation too high. That's the theory behind calibrated military action. Overwhelming force designed not to start a long war, but to prevent one. But then he leaned back slightly. The problem, he continued, is that deterrence only works if the other side decides it's done. Iran, he pointed out, is not a minor regional player. It has missile capabilities. It has regional alliances. It has proxy networks across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. It has asymmetric tools that don't require conventional battle lines. So if you hit them, Rogan said, you have to assume they're going to hit back. Maybe not the way you expect, but they're not just going to shrug. He broke down retaliation scenarios calmly, almost clinically. Missile strikes against Israeli cities, drone swarms targeting US bases in the Gulf, cyber attacks against infrastructure, proxy attacks in neighboring states. Not predictions, not declarations, possibilities. And that's what unsettled listeners. Because Rogan wasn't framing it like a video game or a cable news countdown, he was mapping real consequences. Every action sets a timer, he said. You don't know when it goes off. You just know it's ticking. Then he shifted to the regional picture. The Middle East is not a vacuum. Saudi Arabia watches, the UAE watches, Qatar watches, Turkey watches, Russia watches, China watches. Global oil markets react in seconds. 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, Rogan reminded listeners. If that gets disrupted, you don't just feel it there. You feel it at the gas pump. You feel it in food prices. You feel it in shipping costs. He wasn't speculating wildly. He was connecting dots. And that's where the audience started to understand why this episode felt different. He wasn't asking whether the strike was morally justified. He was asking whether the aftermath was manageable. What if this doesn't stay between two countries? He asked. What if this becomes a regional pressure cooker? He explained how alliances can activate unintentionally, how missile defense systems can miscalculate, how a single overreaction can spiral. You don't plan escalation, he said. You react to it. Then came the part that truly shifted the tone. He talked about time. Modern audiences expect rapid resolution, shock, response, settlement. But geopolitical conflicts don't move at social media speed. If this turns into a sustained campaign, Rogan said, we're talking weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. Air operations, naval deployments, missile defense saturation, supply chains, rotations of troops. You can't half do this, he continued. If you commit, you commit. And that's where the room seemed to tighten, because the implication was clear. This might not be a one-night headline. It could be the beginning of something far more entrenched. He moved into domestic consequences. What happens back home, he asked. Energy prices rise, markets fluctuate, political divisions sharpen, public opinion fractures. Some demand more force, some demand immediate de-escalation. And in the middle are families with loved ones deployed. You don't just fight wars overseas, he said. You feel them at home. Then he pivoted again. What if Iran doesn't escalate the way people expect? That caught people off guard, because most commentary assumes retaliation. But Rogan explored another path: strategic patience. Iran absorbs the blow publicly, retaliates symbolically, but not overwhelmingly, and waits. Waits for diplomatic openings, waits for international pressure to shift, waits for political cycles to change. Sometimes, Rogan said, the long game is quieter, and that possibility was just as unsettling, because it suggests tension without closure. Sanctions tighten, military presence expands, airspace remains volatile, markets remain jittery, a cold pressure instead of open flame. He also addressed the nuclear dimension, not sensationally, but realistically. When you strike facilities tied to nuclear development, he said, you're not just hitting buildings, you're hitting pride, you're hitting sovereignty. And wounded sovereignty can harden positions, it can accelerate programs, or it can bring parties back to negotiation tables under new leverage. No one knows which, Rogan admitted. That honesty stood out. He didn't pretend to have classified insight. He didn't claim secret knowledge. He outlined strategic forks in the road: limited retaliation and reset, regional escalation, sustained air campaign, proxy war expansion, economic shockwaves, diplomatic freeze, or a sudden fragile ceasefire. What happens next, he said slowly, depends on who blinks. That line hit hard, because international conflict often boils down to perception: strength, weakness, credibility, domestic pressure, all of it colliding at once. He then did something that separated the segment from most televised analysis. He zoomed in on ordinary people. You've got families in Israel listening for sirens, he said. You've got families in Iran wondering if tonight's the night their neighborhood gets hit. And you've got American families watching the news wondering if their son or daughter gets deployed. That human layer grounded the entire breakdown. This wasn't abstract chess. It was lived reality. And he made one more point that lingered long after the episode ended. Escalation isn't just about bombs, he said. It's about narratives. It's about what leaders tell their people. It's about whether the public supports the next move. Because no conflict sustains itself without domestic backing. If public opinion fractures sharply enough, leaders adjust. If it hardens, they double down. Rogan didn't conclude with certainty, he concluded with uncertainty. And that's what shocked people most. In an era of instant takes and absolute declarations, he said, we don't know. We don't know if this becomes a wider war. We don't know if it becomes a prolonged standoff. We don't know if diplomacy returns faster than expected. We don't know how markets settle. We don't know how alliances shift. But we do know that once strikes happen at this scale, the world doesn't just snap back to normal. There's always a ripple, and sometimes that ripple becomes a wave. As the episode wrapped, Rogan didn't call for celebration or condemnation. He called for awareness. Pay attention, he said, because what happens next won't just shape the region, it'll shape everything connected to it. Energy, security, politics, global trade, and possibly the next decade of international relations. The audience logged off not with answers, but with a deeper understanding of the stakes. And that's what made the episode resonate. Not because he predicted the future, but because he mapped how many futures are possible. And in a moment when the world felt like it was holding its breath, that sober, layered breakdown hit harder than any shouting match ever could.